the wonderful Annie Dieu-Le-Veut, who has this absolutely extraordinary book out called Stories in the Stars, and Times journalist, Sunday Times I should say, and Sunday Express, and has gone into sort of into the world of shamanism and has written some absolutely fantastic books. But this one in particular is causing a bit of a stir, and rightly so. And I'm going to introduce you now. So hello, Annie.
Hello.
And so, do you want to give us a little bit of a brief outline of the book itself, and how you got into bringing all this together?
Right. Well, it's really interesting because I was just listening to Hugh just now, and it was amazing what he was saying about the love that makes up this universe and how it is structured out of chaos. And I think it's been a lifetime's work to produce stories of the stars that really began in my childhood when I was reading fairy tales like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, to gradually put together some of that structure, or certainly how our ancestors saw that structure, which for them gave their lives meaning and can give our lives meaning today. So it really began in my childhood, and I was fascinated, well, probably like any child, with stories like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio. And then as I got older, I started to read the actual myths that they came from, like the Norse myths and Celtic myths and Greek myths and so on. And I was always reading because I just always, I think, subconsciously had a feeling that the ancestors were trying to tell us something much more than the surface story, that there was a deeper wisdom hidden in the metaphorical layers, if you like. And so I just kept digging down, and always had my nose in a book, and like a bookworm, I couldn't let go of it. And then, as you mentioned later on, I was a journalist, and I sort of got a reputation as a journalist for being like that, for being tenacious, being like a dog with a bone or something, like shaking this. I felt like I was always like trying to shake it so that the truth would fall out. This is what I was like with stories when I was a journalist. And the same was with these myths. And I was thinking, there's something much more here. It was just a sixth sense, really, but I didn't know. But for my midlife crisis, I went to India and stayed in an ashram for 6 months, with Sai Baba's ashram, because I'd heard he was the foremost authority in India on the Vedas, which is the oldest Indian myths. So I wanted to study those there, and I did, and it was fascinating 6 months that I did that. But then I started to realize that all these stories were very, very similar. They all had a hero who went through lots of adventures and fought dragons and rescued land from the floods. There was always a flood. And I started to wonder, why are these stories all the same, all over the world, just with local variations with the name of the hero, or perhaps local places were different, but always it was the same story. So I was already starting to wonder that. And then I met some shamans when I was in Sai Baba's ashram, Mexican shamans, women, that had, it turned out, trained under the same shaman that Carlos Castaneda trained under. And so they were my first teachers in shamanism. And then I'm going to try and cut this short, but I eventually came to live in Glastonbury and started to study astrology and alchemy. And then the whole thing started to come together with the three worlds of shamanism. And I saw that the zodiac was actually spread across three worlds, and the stories were spread across the three worlds of the shaman. And the oldest zodiacs, half the zodiacs down in the underworld, from Capricorn to Pisces. And the underworld is like it's the subconscious, but it's like a sea. Probably I'm getting a bit too into it. For me, that was really exciting. And then we knew about Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces, but I don't think he'd identified that the journey the hero goes through is astrological. He starts at Mars, at Aries, and then goes on to Taurus and meets the bull there, and then he gets eventually to Leo and meets the lion, fights the lion. In all of these stories, not just the Greek ones, not just the Celtic ones, there's the same progression through the zodiac. and then falling down into the underworld at Scorpio. He's bitten by the scorpion, falls down into the underworld. And so I started to think, okay, there are also 6 initiations, alchemical initiations, 3 water initiations and 3 fire initiations that the hero goes through. And all that we're left with today is 1 water initiation, which is the baptism in church. And we've lost the other 2 water initiations and the 3 fire initiations.
What were they?
You look at something called the Eleusinian Mysteries that took place in Greece. They were then doing those initiations. That was the last time they did them, about going back to before Constantine. Before Constantine, the emperor came in the 4th century, and then they trashed all the mystery groves in the preceding hundreds of years after that.
Wow.
So it was practiced before the Romans all around the Mediterranean, and people would come for miles for these initiations.
Wow!
Yeah.
And this sort of comes into the into today's stories. Like in your book, you've got sort of I know it's a bit complicated to sort of say now, but the Pinocchio story,
yeah,
and how that breaks down into the initial stories around the campfire, so to speak, 2,000 years ago, and what those hero journeys are, and how that breaks down, and sort of. How Walt Disney has used that, but didn't complete the story correctly, did he?
No.
So he missed a little bit of the astrological story out.
He's got a gap between Cancer, and then he jumps to Scorpio.
Right. Do we know why he did that, or was that?
Well, time, I guess. He's only got 88 minutes to and keeping people's attention. in a theatre, but also it did break up the story to such an extent that you then regard Pinocchio as just this naughty little boy that suddenly has this Damascian conversion of enlightenment from nowhere, it seems, because actually he learned his lessons in Leo, Virgo and Libra. He learnt his lessons there to transform him into the hero, so then he could think outside of the box, be a genius, save his father, do all those amazing, from the belly of the whale. I think that's the bit of the movie that everyone remembers, that mad chase of the whale as he's chasing Giuseppe and Pinocchio, which means pineal gland, by the way, on a raft. Yeah.
Wow, so that's interesting to know. Pinocchio means pineal gland or pineal gland.
Yeah.
Wow. So it just shows that we've got all these wonderful stories that are from a conscious world. We have one story, but from the subconscious world, it's a completely different story altogether.
It's a wisdom story that shows you what your life is, that you were born, at the time that you were born, the stars were in a certain position to give you your challenges and how to meet those challenges head on, how to be a hero. And when you really do understand those stories, you can be a hero or a heroine in your own life. And that's the main bit I wanted to get across to people, that it has a practical application. It's not just...
No, you've got sort of exercises in there to do, really, haven't you? Which is, and it's a fascinating book. It really is. I mean, I could go to the. I was going to say I'll go to the dark words.
Dark bit.
But I won't. It's and you've got some wonderful drawings. I think Yuri Leach has played a part, isn't he? So,
and also Sam Richardson.
Right.
And he was the proofreader, and his wonderful wife Holly Hazeltree also helped proof it.
And where can we get this book from? Because it is an absolutely fascinating book. You've put a lot of time, energy, work, research. You must really. This is probably about 30 or 40 years worth of work that's gone into this.
Yes.
And sort of carefully done. It's wonderful. So where can anybody get the book from?
Well, they can get it from me if they want to come around for a cup of tea. I've got some biscuits. You can come see me.
And you 10 times to get that from the author. Come round to the house, have a cup of tea, and buy a book. Would you want to buy a book?
Yeah, I always like to meet people that are going to... My books are like my babies that I send out, so I always want to meet the people that are going to read it and see how they get on with it.
That's great. And if they can't get to you, if they're like the other cross side of the world or something, how can they get on?
It's available on every Amazon all over the world, so most people, I think, can get it from there.
Okay. Great. And have you got a website or anything like that?
My website's just my name, Annie Dieu-Le-Veut.
Can you spell that? Because people have got to know how to spell that.
Okay. Well, Annie, and then DIEULUVEUT.com.
Okay. So there we go. So it's AnnieDieu-Le-Veut.com. And you've got wonderful interest. You've got other books on there as well, I suppose, haven't you?
I've got a few other books, all very much inspired by the Avalon mythos around here. So local people will love them, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you do some extraordinary work. There's no doubt about that on that. You deserve every success. It's a wonderful book. I fully recommend it. Stories in the Stars by Annie Dieu-Le-Veut. Big thank you for coming in. Is there anything you want to add to that? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Just that I will give a free day's shamanic training to anyone that reads my book, who buys and reads my book, because by the time they've bought it and read it, they will have had that. It's worth about 3 days of my time in training them. So then they would just be ready for that 4th day of the initiation and training how to do a shamanic journey, which I'll give them for free.
Wow. Wow, look at that, free shamanic journeys. As long as you buy the book, read it, and then prove you bought the book, I'd say. Prove it and take it to Annie, and she'll give you a free day tuition on the shamanic journeys. That's fantastic. Okay. A big thank you for coming in.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I wish you every success in the future.
Thank you.